What if the most dangerous thing in your life right now isn't a disease, a crisis, or an enemy you can see, but a person standing right in front of you wearing a human face, operating as a force designed to keep you spiritually blind? I'm not talking about a metaphor, not a psychological archetype, not the kind of thing a Sunday sermon would dare mention. I'm talking about what the Gnostic texts describe with terrifying precision. Beings that wear human bodies like costumes, that feed on your confusion, your guilt, your submission. And what almost no one talks about is this: Jesus himself left you a map to find them. 7 clues hidden in plain sight. And most people have spent their entire lives in rooms with these beings, never once seeing what they were. You felt something is off. You've been around someone and walked away depleted, doubting yourself, questioning what you believe, and you couldn't name why. You go to church, you pray, you do everything right, and still something inside you feels like it's slowly being drained. You call this spiritual warfare. You call this the enemy. But you were never told the enemy has a face you recognize, a voice you trust, and a seat at your table. The Nag Hammadi texts, writings discovered in 1945, hidden for nearly 2,000 years, describe exactly this kind of being. And the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, all carry fragments of a warning that was systematically removed from everything you were handed. This video is about those 7 clues. This is about learning to see what they never wanted you to see. Are you ready to look? Let's begin. You were taught to be grateful for the religion you received. You were taught that what was handed to you as a child was a gift, a sacred inheritance, the pure word of God passed down through centuries of faithful men. You call this tradition. But tradition is just the word they use for a cage that's been in the family long enough to feel like furniture. Think about how it happened. You didn't choose your beliefs. You were born into a room already furnished with them. As a child, you were told that God watches everything, that doubt is the door sin enters through, that the right kind of person asks no questions and trusts the structure. You were praised when you repeated the prayers exactly as given. You were made to feel the chill of spiritual danger when you asked why. And slowly, not violently, but slowly, you learned to silence the part of you that knew something wasn't right. You call this faith. But it's a trained reflex. You're not walking in truth. You're walking in a script someone else wrote. By the time you were old enough to examine what you believed, the architecture was already built inside you. Guilt as a default setting, fear as a spiritual compass, the sense that your own mind, your own perception is less trustworthy than the institution. That is not the teaching of the real Christ. That is the teaching of something else entirely. You built a spiritual identity on top of that conditioning. You called yourself a believer, a seeker, a person of faith. But beneath it, you've always carried the quiet suspicion that something important was taken from you before you were old enough to know it was there. That suspicion is not weakness. That suspicion is the first movement of the spark. How many times have you silenced a question because you were afraid of what the answer might cost you? How many times have you sat in a room with someone and felt something shrink inside you and told yourself that shrinking was holiness? But here's what the Apocryphon of John reveals. Something the institution that shaped you has spent centuries trying to bury. The force that constructed your spiritual blindness didn't do it from a distance. It did it through people, through specific, identifiable people who operate according to a pattern. And Jesus left you 7 ways to recognize exactly who they are. There is a force operating in the world that the Nag Hammadi texts name without hesitation the Archons. And before you place that word in the category of mythology or fantasy, understand what these texts are actually saying. The Archons are not monsters under the bed. They are not demons with horns. They are described as beings of diminished light, entities that cannot create, only imitate. They cannot generate genuine spiritual energy, so they harvest it from those who can. And the most important thing the texts say about them is this: some of them wear human form. Not metaphorically. The Apocryphon of John describes the Archons as beings capable of appearing as fully human, capable of mimicking the behaviors of genuine spiritual presence, capable of inserting themselves into your life in the roles you trust most: teacher, pastor, healer, guide, parent, partner. They don't announce themselves, that's the entire design. They move through proximity, through authority, through the exploitation of your willingness to trust. You think the emptiness you feel after certain interactions is your own failing. It's your lack of faith, your distance from God, your unhealed trauma. That's exactly what you're supposed to think. It's the performance at its most efficient. You leave the encounter diminished and you blame yourself. They leave the encounter fed. It shows up as the spiritual leader who always seems to know exactly where your wound is and presses on it not to heal it, but to keep it open. It shows up as the person in your life who speaks the language of love and light, while systematically dismantling your confidence in your own perception. It's the voice that tells you your questions are pride, that your doubts are the enemy, that surrendering your discernment is the same thing as surrendering to God. Too precise, too convenient, too perfectly calibrated to keep you dependent. The Gospel of Philip describes the world of the Archons as a system that operates through confusion, not chaos, but managed confusion. A spiritual environment in which you're always almost understanding, always almost free, always one more obedience away from the breakthrough that never quite comes. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound like somewhere you've been? If this is landing somewhere real in you, if this is naming something you've felt but never had language for, subscribe. This channel exists for exactly that recognition. This isn't for everyone, it's for the ones who are ready. But knowing the Archons exist, knowing they operate through human form, that alone doesn't protect you. Because the question you have to be able to answer is, how do you actually see them? What does Jesus say that lets you identify them specifically, not generally? That's what we're moving into now. And if you think you've already seen through the people around you, what comes next will show you how much more precisely you can see. Stay here. The first thing that blocks most people from using these 7 clues is this. They assume recognizing an Archon in human form would feel obvious, like a revelation, a vision, some overwhelming spiritual download. They're waiting for the dramatic. Meanwhile, the thing they need to see is sitting across from them at dinner. The first obstacle is the fear that seeing this way is blasphemy. You've been conditioned to believe that questioning the spiritual authority figures in your life is the same as questioning God, that examining the fruit of those who lead you is spiritual arrogance. But the Gnostic texts are clear when the Gospel of Thomas records Jesus himself making this distinction. The God who punishes your questioning is not the father of the pleroma. The God who needs your obedience to maintain power is not the true source. The demiurge rules through the fear of blasphemy. The real Father of Light teaches through the ignition of your own knowing. Questioning is not betrayal. Questioning is the first act of liberation. The second obstacle is the terror of being alone in this. If you start seeing what these 7 clues point to, you will likely find that people you've trusted, perhaps for years, perhaps your entire life, are revealed as something different than what you believed. That is a specific and profound kind of isolation. The Gnostics understood this. The pneumatics, those who carried the divine spark, were always a minority. They were always misunderstood by those around them. Their solitude wasn't a sign of error. It was a sign of sight. The spark always recognizes itself. And if you're still in this video right now, that recognition is already happening. The third obstacle is the belief that this knowledge is itself dangerous, that learning to see Archons in human form will open something dark in you, invite something dark toward you. This is the Archon's most efficient defense mechanism. Calling the map dangerous is exactly how you prevent the prisoner from reading it. The Gospel of Philip doesn't warn you away from Gnosis, it warns you away from those who are afraid of Gnosis. Truth that threatens a structure is not dark. It's revealing. Each one of these fears was placed, each one was designed. The fact that you feel them isn't evidence that you're wrong to look. It's evidence that what you're looking toward is real. But understanding this intellectually isn't enough. The ancient texts didn't teach theory alone. They taught a path of recognition, precise, practical, applicable. And now we move to the 7 clues themselves. What Jesus actually left you. What almost no one has assembled in one place, in a language you can use right now. The first clue Jesus left is found in the Gospel of Thomas, Logion 45. You will know a tree by its fruit, not by its words, not by its title, not by how much scripture it quotes or how convincingly it performs spiritual authority, by what grows in those who spend time near it. An Archon in human form consistently produces diminished people. Not once, not in a bad season, consistently. If the people closest to someone are becoming smaller, more afraid, more dependent, less capable of trusting their own inner knowing, that is the fruit. See the fruit. Don't listen to the sermon about the fruit. Do this. Look at the people who have been in someone's orbit for more than 2 years. Are they more free? More alive in their own spirit? Or are they more dependent, more anxious, more certain that they need this person to interpret reality for them? This isn't projection, this isn't judgment, this is the tool Jesus gave you. Use it. The second clue is what the Gospel of Philip calls the counterfeit spirit, or the imitation of genuine light. An Archon in human form will speak the language of liberation while building mechanisms of control. The specific pattern is this. They name your wound accurately, they offer themselves as the only source of healing for it, and they ensure the wound never fully closes. You call this spiritual guidance, but it is maintenance of your dependency. The real signal is whether the teaching increases your access to your own inner knowing, or whether it increases your need for theirs. Real gnosis makes the teacher unnecessary. The Archon makes themselves indispensable. Practice this. After time with a spiritual teacher, a pastor, a guide, ask yourself one question. Do I trust my own perception more or less than I did before? The answer is the second clue. The third clue is the texture of the guilt they produce. The Apocryphon of John describes the Archons as beings who use shame as a tether, who need you to believe you are fundamentally insufficient, spiritually damaged, perpetually in need of correction. Real guilt is brief, specific, and generative. It points you toward a clear action and releases you. Archonic guilt is diffuse, permanent, and self-referential. It tells you the problem is who you are, not what you did. If someone in your life has made spiritual insufficiency feel like your permanent condition, if you always leave their presence feeling like you are the problem, that is not conviction. That is a tether. That is the third clue. If this is landing, if these clues are beginning to map onto something you've been living, there are resources that go much deeper into the Gnostic framework for navigating these recognitions. The link is in the description. This is not a sales pitch. It's a door if you want it. The fourth clue is what the Gospel of Thomas calls the love of mastery over love of truth. An Archon in human form is always, ultimately, more concerned with your submission than your understanding. They will tolerate your questions as long as the questions lead you back to their authority. They become reactive, not just uncomfortable, but destabilizing, punishing. When your questions lead you somewhere they cannot follow, real teachers celebrate when the student surpasses them. The Archon cannot tolerate that movement. Watch how someone responds when you arrive at a truth independently. That response is the fourth clue. The fifth clue is invisibility of origin. The Gospel of Philip contains a teaching about the chains of the world, that they are most effective when they appear to be natural. When you feel controlled, the Archon wants you to believe the feeling is your own making. They never position themselves as the source of your limitation. They position themselves as the solution to it. The fifth clue is this: if someone benefits from your confusion remaining unresolved, if their position in your life requires your uncertainty to persist, look carefully at whether they are feeding that uncertainty rather than dissolving it. Confusion that serves the guide is the Archon's signature. The sixth clue Jesus gives is in the mechanism of forgiveness. In the canonical record, Jesus radically relocated the authority to forgive, placing it not in the priest, not in the institution, not in the intermediary, but in the direct relationship between the person and the divine light within them. An Archon in human form will always reconstruct the intermediary. They will make themselves, or the structure they represent, the necessary channel through which your standing before God passes. You call this accountability, but it is toll collection. Any spiritual figure who makes your access to divine grace contingent on their approval is demonstrating the sixth clue. The seventh clue is the oldest and most difficult to see. The Archon in human form has no genuine interiority of their own. This is what the Nag Hammadi texts mean when they describe beings who imitate but cannot originate. You've been around people who seem alive only in relation to the energy in the room, who become a different being depending on who they're with, who, when the room is quiet and nothing is being extracted, seem to go somewhere empty behind the eyes. You called this charisma or mood or exhaustion, but the Gnostics would call it something else. The seventh clue is the absence, the uncanny sense that no one is home in the way that someone is home inside you. Not depression, not trauma, a fundamental vacuum where the pneuma, the divine spark, should be. These aren't theories, these are instruments. Take them, use them, you're already changing. The fact that you've sat with this, that you've let these clues land without shutting them down, that's not nothing. That is the spark doing what it was made to do. You start to feel something sharpen in you when you're around certain people. You begin to trust the wordless signal in your body that has always known before your mind caught up. People who have never questioned anything look at you differently, like you've stopped being readable to them. You feel more alone in some circles and seem more alive. Your dreams are doing something different. The guilt that used to close around you like a fist is losing its grip. This isn't a crisis, it's the first real breath you've taken in years. You're not losing your faith. You're trading compliance for gnosis. And there is no trade in the world more worth making. What's the first clue that made something click for you? Which one mapped onto a relationship or an experience you've been carrying? Say it in the comments, not for me. For the person who will read your words and realize for the first time that they are not alone, that what they've been feeling has a name, and that the seeing is already beginning. Watch the next video. You've come this far. Don't close your eyes now.